Breaking the cycle to step forward. Authentic conversations from lived experience and a professional perspective in overcoming abuse with Chris Tuck and Beverly Ann.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward podcast. Have you got 5 minutes? With me, Chris Tuck, and
myself, Beverly Ann, and this is September's Q&A. Hello.
Hello and welcome. So I believe, Bev, that we've had some feedback from someone who's listened to our podcast. Are you able to read that out for us?
I can, and this is following podcast number 10 about pregnancy and having children, pregnancy and having children, part 1, and there's also episode 11, which is part 2. And this, I'm not going to read out the name, but this was a midwife who contacted us.
Yeah.
And she was saying she was a midwife and she's very keen to raise the awareness of trauma in maternity journey and how this is embedded. She said her own story includes her own very difficult, in fact, blindsiding transition into being a mum, and she's on her healing journey. But there is still so much she wants to learn, and she's a midwife. We don't talk about enough trauma when they're training in midwifery, let alone when we're pregnant. We don't mention it. It's never spoken. So she's been doing a lot of research on her own into ACEs and the stress in the body, and reading books such as The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and also Childhood Disrupted. And she's really aware now of the detrimental effects of having trauma history, and she would like it to have the attention it needs. Her biggest question after all of that was, how can she become more involved in raising awareness to this? Yeah. And I think that's the question that most people want to ask.
So for me, if it's to do with our podcasts, it is to comment on the podcasts, to send in questions, to send in feedback, whether they agree with us or not, because we are interested in having a debate, having a conversation around all of our podcasts. It's about sharing our podcast on all social media platforms, so it gets heard and picked up by more people. Sharing it with fellow professionals. So that midwife, for example, it would be fantastic if she just sent links in to our podcast to the people that are running these hospitals. For them to hear it would be fantastic. Also inviting us along to professional environments to do lunch and learns, or even doing webinars, do it digitally, do it online. And also inviting us to speak at their events. We are open to all of this, and also apply to be a guest on our show and bring to us and our listeners, what has your journey been like? What has helped you? What has hindered you? And what would you like to see change? So that midwife, for example, if we could get her on as a guest, because she's got the professionalism of working in her environment, she knows what works, what doesn't. She's got years, I would assume, of professional experience of working with mothers to be. She's gone for it herself. She knows what it feels like. She can tell us what is needed. So that would be a whole brand new conversation in itself, and that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. And I think what's important as well for us to highlight here as well, something that we talked about before we started recording, is how many people, due to the trauma and the abuse that they've experienced beforehand, have made a decision, whether it be consciously or subconsciously, not to go ahead and have children through pregnancy, because they may have decided to go through other routes, because they had this fear of the impact of trauma, or they felt isolated. And when I say fear, I'm very much a believer in people having informed choice and not making decisions based on fear or being dictated to by other people's beliefs and misguided information. So informed choice is paramount. So the biggest thing as well for me, and that we spoke about, is how in pregnancy we don't talk about trauma.
I want to caveat here, because there are a cohort of people that understand about trauma and its impact on the body before they get pregnant. But I believe that's few and far between. I didn't know about trauma until after I'd given birth, and I had that postnatal depression, and then I had that slide into a breakdown. So that's how I learned about adverse childhood experiences and stress in the body and all of that. All of the abuse that I'd suffered as a child, all I ever wanted was a child of my own to love. I didn't know that this thing called trauma existed. I didn't know my body was holding on to everything during pregnancy, giving birth, and afterwards. I didn't know any of that. It's only with hindsight and looking back that I know this. Yeah. But would I have liked information back then when I was pregnant? Yes, because that would have given me empowerment to go through my pregnancy and birth in control, not scared, and not having the impact that all of that had on me as an individual. What about you?
Absolutely the same. So I didn't consciously understand or know that past trauma would affect me in pregnancy. I do remember as I became pregnant and started to go to the hospital for checkups that I mentioned once or twice that I'd been sexually abused, but it wasn't received in any way. It was like, oh, okay. So I thought, oh, am I being over dramatic mentioning that?
Right.
What I didn't realize was actually I was being triggered a lot, and it did have an impact, and I'd miscarried as well beforehand.
Right.
So there's all of that. And so for me, I thought I isolated myself and thought I was the one that was abnormal. So when I went for my scans, and when I was getting off, I was really holding myself together because my legs felt like jelly. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, there's a living, breathing human being in my body, and I've been disassociating from my body. But a lot of that became subconscious. I pushed it down and suppressed it. And I had 2 children, and I didn't realize I consciously only wanted boys, believing at that time that I could keep boys safer because I'm a girl and I got abused. And back then we didn't have the knowledge that we have now. And it was when I had a daughter, the responsibility, it was like, whoa. And it was as she was young, that's for me when I will say the walls start closing in, postnatal depression, whatever you want to call it. But I remember thinking, bouncing along at first, thinking I can do this, yeah. And suddenly it's like the walls are closing in, and you feel like you're losing control. And for me, that was because I was listening to all those myths. Because I've been abused, I'm going to abuse. I'm going to be that awful person. Also, that responsibility. How would I keep my daughter and my son safe? How would I keep them both safe? That kind of thing. So it was then that I was able to reach out. Well, I reached out to the Samaritans, and they put me in touch with a charity, which is Family Matters, and I don't mind sharing that. So would I have wanted to know? Yes, I would have wanted to know.
Yeah.
And that very first time when I went to the doctors, etc., if I'd been given some information.
Yeah.
So even just to highlight it, just to make me think, oh, I'm normal, and I can get further information if I choose to.
And help and support.
Yeah. And I will be honest as well, I didn't actually formally make a decision to be pregnant. And I think that's what some of it was, because I always said I didn't want children until I was much older. I was still late 20s, but in my mind, I was like, I'll have children later.
Right. I think in this day and age, in 2023, knowing what we know about adverse childhood experiences and trauma and pregnancy, childbirth, etc., there's enough of us that know this stuff now, the impact. I think there is a duty of care for health practitioners, especially in midwifery, perinatal care, pre and postnatal care, that there should at least be a leaflet, some guidance, some advice, just freely available, just to say, have you ever, for example, have you ever suffered adverse childhood experiences? And this could include child abuse, sexual abuse, whatever the wording, but be very specific, be very clear and concise, and just have it there. Like you do you suffer from domestic violence? Have you ever suffered HIV? These are leaflets, are all just there.
Yeah.
So it should just be a leaflet. Now, if I was sitting in my GP waiting for one of my perinatal checkups, you know, before you give birth, those checkups, I've forgotten what it's called.
Antenatal.
So long ago. Antenatal, there you go.
Yeah.
If I'd seen one of those leaflets, I would have gone, wow. I would have picked it up, I would have read it. And if I'd read in there, if you've been abused, this could affect your pregnancy journey in these ways. And if you feel you need to talk to someone or get help and support along your journey at any time, here's some phone numbers or here's some resources that you can access. I would have been, oh my God. And I would have looked into all of that, and I would have actively done something about all of the whole journey.
Yeah.
Because what I went through afterwards, not knowing that it was normal to respond in the way that I did to those abnormal experiences I had as a child, if I knew that was normal, the mental health impact and the physical health impact would have been so much less. It just would have been.
Absolutely. And I didn't go to the classes that you can go to before you have the baby.
Antenatal, love.
Yeah. The evening classes,
Yeah.
I didn't go to them because what they said what they'll do is talk us through different things that happen if something goes wrong at birth. That absolutely scared the life out of me, because already I was going through a natural birth. That was my choice, as much as my body was going to allow it. And I didn't realise what I was doing. That was through fear. Was like, I'm not going there. And so I just shut it away, and I went to see Ghost, I think it was, twice, with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore.
He's worth going to see, isn't he? Bless him.
Oh, yeah. And it did help. Now what I realise is that was mindfulness. But when it came to the actual birth, it absolutely, I was absolutely scared, as we spoke about. And the impact, and it could have been so different. And I'm not, as always, we want to say that this is not in any way finger pointing or anything. It's about making change. It's about having these conversations to enable change, because we can't change what's happened in the past. But what we can do is use that experience to make changes going to the future. But to know that I wouldn't be the only one, that some of the things I was feeling was normal, to know that I could access, and to know that I was being given permission. So saying that I was a survivor of abuse was hard enough telling strangers anyway, but then for it to be dismissed was like, whoa, okay, I'll shut up then. And that impacts on the shame still that you're carrying. And then afterwards, to have that midwife not speak to me because I was choosing not to breastfeed, because I didn't want to impact my trauma onto my children, and react. Maybe that would have helped in that circumstance. So that's why this is, very passionate about this. And that's why I'm so pleased to have heard from a midwife, because it makes a big difference.
who's understood where we were coming from with the podcast number 10 and 11, and actually on our page to try and get that message out there more clearly. Now, what I do want to share with everyone, that the Survivors Trust, I've got a program, and it's called Check With Me First. Yeah. And it's about working within the NHS, raising awareness about any kind of treatment that a survivor is having. So whether it be pregnancy, whether it be chemotherapy, whatever the treatment is please check with me first. Don't do nothing to me, about me, without involving me. So check with me first. So I just wanted to bring attention to that program, because as you said, Bev, it's learning from the past experiences to make changes so that everybody has a better response. So it's less triggering and less traumatizing. Yeah, we don't want to
Absolutely.
go back there.
No, we don't. And we were at a NHS conference only last week,
Yeah.
which I personally found very triggering, if
Okay, do you want to
honest.
share?
Yes, because there's this fear when we talk about abuse, particularly sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And there's a big fear around this, even with professionals.
Yeah.
And we heard it on that day. You
Go
know,
on then.
it was all about mental health. How many times did we hear about abuse being spoken?
I personally, throughout the whole day that I attended, heard it twice, but it was like in a sentence. It wasn't really explained or explored.
Yeah. The best was right at the end.
Yes.
So everything was spoken about mental health. And when I brought something up, a subject up, about a gateway for mental health, I asked about some information to do with abuse. And I said, particularly, I specialise in sexual abuse because it's the least abuse that anybody wants to talk about. And
Yeah.
straight away, someone in their professional capacity shut me down. It was like, no, that's deep trauma. You can't go there. And I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. When we're talking about mental health, do people walk through the door with different labels on them? Oh, I've experienced this level of trauma. I've experienced the little traumas. I've experienced more traumas. Or do you know what? I've experienced these big, huge traumas that you don't actually want to ask me about at the moment.
Yeah.
And for me, I find that very frustrating. Now, there are always two sides. So there's a safeguarding issue. But
Yeah.
surely, if there was more training, more awareness, when you're talking about the lunch and learns workshops, if there was more awareness, more conversations where people felt safe to ask those questions.
Any question, simple or complicated.
Yeah, and the other thing people are fighting to do is offend. And what I always say, and I know you do, is look, if it's asked with the best intentions, it won't offend.
It won't
What
offend.
offends me more is someone shutting down. And
Yes. And by
and
God, guys, she got angry, did our Bev. She was
oh,
not happy. And
because
I'm
yeah,
behind you.
because this person was in a high position of psychology, and there was another person as well in occupational therapy. And if they're not able to have this conversation without being fearful themselves, wow, what are you radiating off? Because I'm a survivor and a professional, and I got it straight away.
And you know what, Bev, carrying on from that conversation, see, we veered off, but this is what we do, guys, and this is where the magic is. There are so many professionals that I know that are survivors, but will not say they're survivor in their professional field, because they've all said to me they are looked at differently.
And sadly, that is the old belief and the old way of working. We know that for many years. One of the best things I went to was back in 2017, was the launch of a new booklet, and I've still got it. It was released by the British Psychological Society, and it was about sexual abuse. And there were 7 presenters, and 6 of them were at their own different stage of revealing that they were survivors, victims, survivors, whatever word is right, thrivers for you. And it makes me go goosebump, because I remember being in that audience thinking, wow, this is the start of transition. And what I love about the British Psychological Society, because I am a member, and when I get the magazines through, they share lived experience in different stories, and I embrace that. And we need to embrace that further, especially within the medical remit, because lived experience, as we heard last week at the mental health conference, is a vital and recognised now mode of expertise.
Absolutely. And I want to back that up as well. I'm actually presenting in Edinburgh at the end of September at an ISPSCAN event. So it's an international, basically, child safeguarding event. And I'm going to be presenting with Dr. Teresa Redmond, who I work with at the University of East Anglia, Anglia Ruskin University. And we are speaking about the lived experience from a professional perspective, but also from having personal lived experience, and marrying that up and making sure that whatever institution is trying to make a change, cultivate a cultural change, a difference within their workforce, for their service users. So whoever it is, that they used the lived experience of the service user that they are working with, because that is where you get specific change that is relevant in treating, helping, supporting that particular group that you're working with. So it's so important.
Absolutely. And as we heard last week at the mental health conference, it's the nuances. When you're a service provider, but also a service user. So when you provide a service professionally, but you've got lived experience. You understand the nuances. And you're not having to reveal your whole life experience to someone. But for, someone that you're working with, I can see in seconds, if I mention that I'm a survivor, I already know when they're not. Without even speaking, it's the way the body reacts. And that's not even done with malicious intent.
No.
Sometimes you see the fear, as I saw last week, and it got shut down. But sometimes it's the discomfort, and other times it's like, oh, and they want to ask more. That's fine. But you can also tell when someone is comfortable. Because you don't have to explain everything.
But going back to the original sort of question, how can people get involved with the work that we do? I think we've clearly explained it at the beginning, but it's also about taking what they learn, either from this podcast, from books they read, from their professional environment, from other conversations that they have with others, and taking their expertise and lived experience and having those conversations with the next person, taking it to their organization, starting up a group, for example, just whatever you feel you can manage to do, but try and pass the baton on a little bit, so we make a small circle into a massive circle. So it's dropping that pebble into the pond and just seeing the ripple effect go outwards. Because we know other lived experience survivor thrivers who are absolutely smashing it work-wise with what they're doing, and then there's others that feel like they're not getting anywhere. And I'm just saying here right now, whatever work you're doing, it's all valid, it's all valuable. Just keep knocking at those doors, like we are keep knocking at the doors, and just try and move forwards with what you truly believe in, and it will make positive change for others around.
Absolutely.
And you might never get to know who you're actually helping until you might get an email or a little message, or you know, you'll get something, some kind of recognition that you've touched somebody, you've helped somebody move forward. And that's what all of this is for.
Absolutely. So well said. So how do people get in contact with us? Well, first and foremost, our email address is breakingthecycle2, and that's a TO, not the number 2, stepforward@gmail.com.
We made it nice and long for you all.
If you're watching this as a video, you can comment below and we'll see your comment and come back to you. If you also, in the links in the wording underneath the video, there will be the contact as well. If you're listening to us, you can pass us on. And if you're listening to us in, for instance, Apple, and somebody listens in Spotify, that's okay, because we're on all different platforms. So we haven't just followed one person, we're on Google. You can even ask Alexa and she'll find us on Mintwave Radio. So Alexa, please find Breaking the Cycle 2 Step Forward podcasts. So, or you can Google us, we're easily found. With regards to asking us about working with you, please contact us again through all of these places. There's a link if you're listening to us in the podcast information. Remember to follow us or subscribe, as they say, and contact us, and we'll be happy to have a conversation with you and find out what it is you're looking for, budgets, etc.
Yeah, lovely. So we need to wrap that up today, because Have You Got 5 Minutes is turned into 30 plus, I can imagine. All right. So we will see you in the next podcast, everyone. Take care of yourselves and bye for now.
And can I just say, we're just about to finish on 30 minutes exactly for a change.
Oh, wow. I'm impressed. I am impressed.
So thank you everyone again, and bye-bye from me.